All right, okay. Welcome everyone to the lunchtime session, the Tech versus Nature session here at SET Week. Thank you for joining us. And in today's session, we are going to talk about how the global economy can reach carbon neutrality. It is really one of the hot topics at the moment. Everyone is talking about it. Also, maybe right at the start, we're talking here about carbon neutrality. We are aware of the different types of neutrality. We have climate neutrality, greenhouse gas neutrality, carbon neutrality. So we will point out what we're talking about when we're talking about it. But when talking about reaching carbon neutrality, we always look at two ways of how we can do this. We look at the tech side of things, by reducing carbon emissions from the atmosphere, by drawing it from the atmosphere through technical solutions, so carbon capture and storage, carbon capture utilization, and we're looking at the nature side of things, nature-based solutions, which very much revolve around forestry and natural carbon sinks, so also mangroves or ocean-based solutions. Our panelists here today will discuss what they are doing in this aspect, their approaches to this topic, and what they are doing to achieve this. We will have a discussion about both types of solutions. Is one maybe better than the other? Do we need both? Are they equal? Are they complementing each other? So it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and we will start with short opening comments by the panelists. Before we start, also, unfortunately, Diego hasn't been able to join us yet. We hope that he will still be able to comment a little bit later, so apologies for that. We are trying to get in touch with him, but nevertheless, we will start with this really great panel here. So at the moment, joining us are Dr. Lynn Li, Director of Global Policy and Advocacy from WWF International, Charlotte Streck, Co-founder and Director of Climate Focus, and Ulrich Seitz, Managing Director of BayWa ReEnergy Ventures. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. And we'll start with Lynn and your opening comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia, and thank you for this great opportunity to be able to share my thoughts. So, as introduced by Pia, I'm Lynn Bin Li from WWF International as a Global Policy Advocacy Director. But one more thing, I'm also WWF China's Conservation Director, overseeing all the conservation climate work for the 11 years from 2006 to 2017. So I can give you quite of a hands-on experience. I'd like to touch the 4 points that I know this top line now, and maybe later in the discussion. One is about nature versus climate. How they are reinforcing each other, benefiting each other, but reinforcing each other, good and bad, positive and negative. Second is that what does the carbon neutral or greenhouse neutral or climate neutral actually mean from which angle, like from energy mitigation angle, but what is nature-based solution can provide for that. I'm also interested to know that how can we see the technical solutions and nature-based solution can really reinforcing each other in our combating towards the carbon neutral future, but also nature positive future. Then I'm also interested to hear from panels or from participants talk about how can we make that happen. So I'm happy to join this and to hear and to share and to learn and to find actions together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. And welcome to you, Charlotte.
Hello, welcome. So I'm here and I'm clearly representing the nature on the nature versus tech panel. I dedicate my work all to protection of forests and ecosystems. Let me use now this 1 minute or 2 minutes that I have to give you a bit of an introduction on what nature-based solution means in the context of the Paris Agreement, the 1.5 degree goals, because I'm aware that this is, of course, an event for mostly for energy savvy people. So let me tell you what we're talking about. The nature-based solution, or what we call AFOLU, agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, make about 23% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And if we look at the whole food system, it's about 30% of the global emissions. The AFOLU, let's talk about scientifically, we rarely refer to nature-based solution, but to this sector in general. They also hold the potential for about 30% of the greenhouse gas mitigation solutions. And this is about 15 gigatons per year in mitigation between 2020 and 2050. And this involves, so where do these 15 megatons come from? So it is a reduction of emissions from deforestation and degradation. We need to generally almost eliminate deforestation, then a reduction of the emissions from agriculture, then a shift to plant-based diets, a 50% reduction in food waste and losses, and the restoration of forests, the improvement of forest management, the enhancement of soil carbon, and finally also more problematic solutions, which are bioenergy and carbon capture and storage, which fall into the area of geoengineering and are not nature-based solutions, but they also help to remove carbon. Now, what we will discuss here, and this is really only to set the stage, about how the first part of these emission reduction buckets that I mentioned, so reduced emissions, reduced emissions from agriculture, shift of diets, shift in reduction in food loss and waste, they spare land. That means they allow us to use land more efficiently, which is necessary because the other part of the mitigation solutions consume land. That is restoration of wetlands, restoration of forests, restoration of coastal ecosystems, and finally also the more problematic bioenergy capture and storage solution. And this is also where the energy discussion meets the nature discussion in terms of the faster we reduce energy emissions, the less we are dependent on non-tested solution that involve the land. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. And now over to you, Ulrich.
Thank you. Yeah, Charlotte, that was very interesting because I'm clearly from the other side, from the tech side as a venture capital investor. So I'm representing BayWa ReEnergy Ventures, which is the venture arm of BayWa Renewable Energies, a globally active project developer in wind and solar. We have quite some history in that space and experienced a tremendous growth over the last years, from coming like around 30 to 50 people 10 years ago to now over, I think, 2,700 or something like this. Even in my last 3 years, we were doubling in size. And for me, this is just showing how tremendously the importance of our work here is growing. Carbon neutrality is, of course, one of the most important goals we're facing, or we are having in front of us, but we are doing this at the moment, also for business reasons, especially in the venture arm. So, of course, we want to support exciting technologies with high scalability, but at the end, we want to earn money out of it. And that's why I think that tech in that space has a great chance to show its potential in the next years, and I'm happy to discuss more about that.
Okay, thank you for your statements. And I think, yeah, we've already touched upon it. So we have what role should the different solutions play? So tech, Ulrich just said, it has got the potential of high scalability and can have a big impact. Then at the same time, we're also looking at natural carbon sinks that are already out there, and then that we're also looking at growing. So what do you think looking at the short term, which one is it more nature-based or technology that can help us to take that first big step towards reducing our emissions? Maybe Lynn, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. Thank you so much. As I said, technology solutions are really needed, as Outreach just mentioned. In a way, technology can really build scale. So I can give a few examples. So in WWF, we work with business a lot, setting the science-based targets or that. But quite importantly, we work both with innovators and the sector lead, and also in a bigger platform with a business climate coalition type of work. So I can just give you an example on the climate solvers, similar to what Outreach mentioned. Climate solvers, we really engaging what will be the innovators in all aspects of the world, so they can find the solutions to solve climate challenge. So I can give you two examples, which cover both like technical and the nature part. One example is in one of the provinces in China, Zhejiang province, there's one company. They actually deployed 45,000 PV panels and to be generating the electricity from solar. And then what they do is that that panel can operate for 25 years. And what they do, each year they can really generate 12 million kilowatts hours of electricity. What does that mean? That means 10,000 household annual use of electricity can be generated. That basically 12 million kilowatts hours covering about 10,000 household, and that's the scale of one company. And doing that, think about how that, if that applied to the whole world, what that's gonna look like. Basically, you generate the power from solar, and then going away from fossil fuel, and really achieve this greenhouse gas emission reduction. I give you another example. It's really interesting. Think about the food waste. I think Charlotte talked about food and forestry, food related. Food waste. We about like 30 to 50% of production as somehow one way or another waste in the production or consumption part. So we actually have a huge food waste challenge. The waste is not only just wasting your food, the resources that you put into growing them, but also they become, when they rot, they become emission of the carbon, eventually methane or carbon. So we find an innovator in China who is actually using a kind of they call a black soldier fly to process the food waste to turn them into protein, because the larvae, everything. So in a way they process it into protein, but also fertilizer. I guess you got what I meant. The flies using the food waste to generate the next generation of larvae, and then they become a protein for fish, for chicken, for whatever it is. And then the process of food become a fertilizer, organic fertilizer. You can go to grow more food. And I just give an example that if 2% of the world organic solid waste processed this way, by 2025, we could save 42 million tons of CO2 emission. I just use this two examples to say technical solution is a really critical solution for the challenge we're facing. I just want to also add, technical solutions are not the only solutions. Well, if we don't work on nature, we don't avoid what could come out from a peatland, as Charlotte mentioned, from deforestation, from the carbon sink, the nature carbon sink, we're going to have a bigger trouble. So therefore, I would say, combating climate change, we need, first of all, to think about how do we really reduce the need of energy. That means changing our lifestyle, looking different ways of supporting the energy. Second, if for those energy we do need to use, we have to think about how do we conserve them when we're using them. And also we need to think about how to increase efficiency in a way, same amount of energy serving bigger purposes than it's oriented to do. And then we have to really look at the nature-based solution to see, although I know nature-based solution, as Charlotte mentioned, has many definitions, really, for societal challenges, or some of the past nature initiatives has not been calculated for their contribution to climate change. That's what we need to do. So this is really how I see nature-based solutions and tech-based solutions. They have all to be working together. Although I know the audience for this talk. It's more of an energy startups, more technical side of solution. But we need to think about it as a whole. We need really see the synergetic action together of both nature and technical solution to really solve the common challenges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you maybe want to build on this, Charlotte?
Sure. A number of things. First of all, tech can be everything, of course. Tech, can be good, can be bad, can be helpful, can be detrimental. So tech is absolutely essential to enable nature-based solution. We have made, and that is great, we have made enormous progress in the last 2 decades in terms of monitoring forest carbon loss. We have made a lot of progress in identifying areas where we can restore forest. We have made progress in monitoring and enabling communities and people on the ground to monitor forest loss. So this is fantastic. Also, of course, in the area of agriculture, in many areas, we really depend on technology to enable nature-based solutions. This is very important. And secondly, we have also tech where it complements nature-based solutions, so where it adds emission reductions in addition to nature-based. But we also have the risk of that tech can also let's say complicate nature-based solution in the sense where it consumes land and where it pushes nature-based increases the pressure on ecosystems, let's say it this way. And this comes back to this whole issue about global land competition. If we look at global climate scenarios, we agree that we need to, as rapidly as possible, reduce greenhouse gas emissions from energy and fossil fuels and from fossil fuels. The faster it goes, the less we depend on carbon removals from nature or non-nature systems. The longer we lag behind in these models, with carbon transition, the more we start doing adventurous things, in terms of, or we depend on adventurous things in terms of land and geoengineering. And the big problem there in the climate models is if we see a greater delay, we see that there is more dependence starting 2030 on bioenergy, carbon and capture and storage. And I mentioned that before. That means large, fast-growing plantations, which are then used, which are burned to use, and the energy is used and the carbon is stored. And the problem with this is that it can consume enormous amount of territory and compete with food and food supplies. And this is, I just mentioned, this is problematic. And I just would like everybody who thinks that easily, we have so much land and we can just store and more carbon and trees and all is, great. And that this would give us, an excuse not to reduce energy emissions. I just would like to dispel this notion.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Ulrich, you said obviously you're also looking at the business models behind this. So you're active in the especially wind and solar sector. Have you also been looking at business models beyond that and at business cases beyond that, especially when it comes to maybe more the carbon capture side of things or carbon reducing side of things?
Sure, we have. I think for a venture capital investor here, it's a lot about scalability and how asset heavy those investments would be. And most of the companies who are strong on the carbon capture side are a pretty heavy asset. They need a lot of investments basically, and scalability is questionable. So they are not in our main scope, I would say. But roughly a year ago, I learned of an extremely interesting company in the US. It's called Carbon Engineering, and what they're basically saying is that one plant of them can do the work of roughly 40 million trees. So this for me was a very impressive number to learn about. But from an investment perspective, and especially from a venture capital perspective, those business models are not the most interesting ones.
Okay, so which ones would then be the more interesting ones that are less asset intensive, or?
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
Basically, what we are seeing everywhere in the venture capital space that most investors invest in companies with a strong software backing. That value creation is based to a high extent on software, because there, of course, is the biggest scalability, and there might be a trend that investors will also look more again into, I would say, more hardware intense businesses, because they are easier to protect through patents. But at the moment, it's still clearly on the software side. And carbon capture with software, at least directly, that doesn't work.
That's true. I guess it also goes back to a discussion that came up over 10 years ago already about the price and value of ecosystem, right? And ecosystems, and how much does it cost to keep companies from cutting down forests or from deforestation. And then you've got a whole different discussion again about when it comes to the venture capital side. But I think we also briefly already touched upon the or Lynn, you mentioned some innovation, or the importance of innovation that you're working, or the startups you're working together with. I just wanted to ask all of you, I mean, when it comes to technical solutions, we also very often immediately think about startups and startups coming up with new ideas, new technologies. It's also obviously something that here at SET we're looking at a lot. But also, what role do startups and innovation play in the more nature-based solution space?
I guess I will start.
Yeah.
So startups, to be honest, first of all, they are startups. They are looking more into the acute, immediate business opportunities for them to do. So I would say for them to look at the bigger scale, nature-based solution, the bigger scale is not really maybe too appropriate. But I think nature-based solution, the nature solution that can store carbon, also need technology support, but that might need some kind of like a market support, policy support, or venture capital or investor support. That's maybe the case. Maybe they can also borrow from existing model. So I continue with this climate solver I mentioned. So climate solver is really WWF, started from Sweden and later spread into many countries. We are now, in the past less than 10 years, we awarded 100 startups. Like I just mentioned, I gave you 2 examples, but there are hundreds of them. The innovation we did there as an NGO, as a WWF, we try to bring the innovators. So they are not mature in the market yet. They are just idea, and they do a small scale, the food waste processing, there's a data storage and a cold data storage. There is a rooftop, like the earlier session mentioned, the rooftop. Those are the initiatives they started. But what we try to do, we try to bring the investors and the companies but also policymakers all coming together. So that the award we give, like Climate Solver Award, we give to the company after assessing. Usually it's about 10-to-1 ratio. 10 application, maybe one could be rewarded. So that rewarded actually the investor has seen the opportunities of business, business financial returns. The decision maker can see their contribution to the decisions, and the company find they are doing good for society, also doing good for their bottom lines. I think that's also type of innovation in addition to a company innovation as a technology. But I think the approach innovation that I just mentioned is also critical to really address the climate change issue. That's why combined with my first point that in a way, looking at the small startups to look at the nature-based solution, there should be some policy incentives or investment incentives. So the venture capital that Osh mentioned, maybe think about how to do the social impact investment, investing into this kind of initiative innovations that can serve both. But I would say bigger scale nature-based solution for climate change, like the carbon storage by peatland or forest, that's need bigger challenges. So when I have a time, I will talk about how do you engage on the supply chain. Maybe I can talk now. So the other thing is that not only just technical innovators start up to do that, but also thinking about how do we influence the supply chain of companies. If we have deforestation supply chain of the food flooring, like IKEA was, I think was a session before, the flooring companies, they say all their wood coming from the FSC Forest Store Council certified product, which really look into the social but also environmental carbon issue. In a way, that could also make huge changes of reducing carbon emission as well. I think all those type of things, I would call it, they are all kind of innovation. So not only just technical, strictly technical innovation, but there's also process, there's thinking, there's organizational innovation that can all work together. Maybe I will stop here for this.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte, have you come across interesting startups, or what role does startups or innovation play in your work?
Of course, if you look at these various areas where we need mitigation around nature-based solution and the earth, there are everywhere. There are startups. There are, as I mentioned already, there are the satellite-based monitoring systems that are promoted by startups. But if you look at restoration, there are lots of startups that try to collect funds in very different and innovative ways to enable forest restoration. There is a lot is happening around food and reducing emissions around food, but also in finding the whole discussion on meat replacement. So we have seen diet shift startups that promote plant-based diets, a lot around what already Lynn mentioned around food loss and waste. So loss, mostly solutions that try to enable storage of food in mostly in developing countries where such systems are not available, and then reducing food waste in developed countries, so in our countries. So and agriculture generally around irrigation, new crops. So it is absolutely essential. But I think it needs to what is not happening so far where improvement could happen, to put it mildly, is the complementarity of public funds and private funds and enable these transitions that we need in the land sector. So we still have enormous agricultural subsidies, around 600 billion per year globally, and this is not, most of these agricultural subsidies do not take into account climate or conservation objectives. So shifting those, combining with deploying extra fund that enable startups and enable them to scale, what Ulrich meant, is really essential to accelerate whatever all these little startups are doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Charlotte. So my answer for that question is very simple. Directly in the energy space, we don't see too many startups active in that field. We see them at the edge of our investment scope. We see them at agriculture. We see them at circular economy, but usually not directly in the energy space where we invest. So it's a pity, but usually there's no direct link to our investment scope.
And have you seen an increase in startups that are going this way, or because you're looking at a lot of startups every day, every year, I think, and have you seen a shift in the focus there a lot?
Not really, but
Okay.
I think I'm not the best person to answer that question, as we don't see too many of those startups. But 3 or 4 years ago, there were already plenty of startups which were promoting a switch in dietary and reforestation and circular economy. They are there for a couple of years. If there are more now, I don't know.
Okay, and maybe just
maybe I can add some in there about scale or different type of startups. So in our mind, we talk startups are really from the idea, so small group people coming together to do something. But there might be some other type of startups. For example, I give example on Alibaba in China. So this is a platform really for trade of goods. But they are financial service. They actually did something they called ant forest initiative called ant forest, because they call it ant financial service. In a way, if small amount of money you can put into them so they can accumulate in bigger and then do bigger things. What they did was they called for general public, like people, you and me, to either donating your steps. In a way, if you exercise every day, you're donating your steps, you donate your you do what good for your health into the ant forest, and then accumulate enough, they will plant trees in maybe one of desert in a Kubuchi desert. So in a way, they plant the trees. So in a way, it's ant forest. In a way, you are contributing, go there to plant trees. I think those type of initiative, they are not really startups, but they are really the fresh ideas building on the existing system or existing structure to do something different there, where you change the land, you change the desert into something more productive. You have less land restoration. You plant trees, is sequestering carbon. You encourage general public to exercise more, so to be healthy population. You contribute that to the society. So I would just say the initiative like that maybe also should think about it, like how they don't maybe they don't need the venture capital because they have enough money from Alibaba to invest on their own. But I think that's kind of an innovation to think about it. I think Charlotte mentioned about, or Pia, you mentioned about how to really complement, and then they can build a synergy. They can, 1 + 1 more than 2, more than 3. That may be the thinking. Think about startups, not just about startup companies from a small group, but more startup from something existing, and then to build new sparks of that solving climate and nature challenges. Yeah, thank you. Just share that.
Yeah, thank you. It's really interesting. And I think another topic that we already touched upon as well is when looking at the different solutions, and I think Charlotte, you actually sort of had it in order that first we need to reduce our emissions or reduce the energy consumption. Then we're looking at clean energy generation, so the tech side, and then the third step is we need to look at how do we reduce or extract the emissions that we still need to extract. And I think all of these steps, what's really important there is to have some sort of acceptance from the population, from everyone really, from people involved and people who have to maybe change their behavior or not. What do you think? Where do you see maybe where is still some hurdles to get more acceptance for these steps, and where do you think it's already pretty easy, it's quite easy to get the general population on our side, so to say, to implement these changes and or to change behavior even?
Yeah, I can give you from my personal experience. I started in WW China in 2006, where at that time the Chinese as a country have an initiative called 20% of energy intensity reduction, basically per GDP unit of energy use, that's intensity to reduce that. I remember at that time, it's 2006, I tried to talk about energy efficiency, talk about low carbon. The general public didn't, they understand saving energy, saving money a little bit, but all the rest was not really get into the people's mind. Now, fast forwarding, now 14 years later, you can see on the street people riding electricity scooters, they riding the buses run on electricity, cars on electricity, and in a way, the way of using energy changed a lot. So I would say, observing all those years, I think that change doesn't happen naturally, and only saving money doesn't really incentivize enough for the general public or for individual behavior. I think that's coming together with the challenge we're facing in a way. Education about climate change, about warming, because people started feeling warming. Every year it's the warmest, hottest year. So they are aware. And then there's also national policy talking about, China. I can also tell you, I started a low carbon initiative in China, and I got no acceptance from then Chinese government. I can tell you a story. That time they say low carbon is the concept Western invented to stop China from developing. Did you hear similar talks recently? Yeah, that's Donald Trump said that, which is like after 15 years, I see the totally opposite. But that situation changed. So national policy changed. So in a way, China wanted to go carbon neutral by 2060, that President Xi Jinping just announced a month ago. So this, you see that the change will happen. Not so easily, but it will happen. So that takes communication, education, and change of nature crisis, political willingness, government, business, NGO all coming together, society all coming together. I think that's really the changes happen. On the other, I just also want to add another point is that I think Charlotte touched upon we don't have unlimited land to produce the renewable, all that we need. But I just want to say that we also need to let the public, like a business, all know that there is opportunity, there is a way out. For example, if we use just 0.3% of Sahara area, desert, only 0.3% of area to generate solar energy, it can serve all the needs of Europe. If we only use like 0.1% of the ocean energy, 15 billion people would be benefit from that. So in a way, I would say, if we use like only 1/3 of the, in the days, 1/3 of energy from building needs come from thermal, that's also solve all kinds of energy problem. So I think we should think big and also small. Startups came from small, but we also need to see the bigger picture, big environment context, so that we can all move together. I would say finding solutions for climate, for nature degradation, like one organization, one unit, one startup, one sector, one financial institution, one never work together. Has to be a whole, has to be really working together. I think we even just today we have a business, we have an NGO, we have really the government all together. I think that's really the way to solve this huge challenge that we're facing together.
Thank you. Yes. Maybe Charlotte.
Yeah. Just, some concluding thoughts here from me. Also in terms of challenge, when we look at nature-based solutions, generally the public likes nature-based solution because, restoring forests, protecting forests, avoiding deforestation. All this is probably the most straightforward and most acceptable way of engaging in climate mitigation. Well, you know, or it is whether even those that are, you know, skeptics about particular aspects on what to do next. Normally, this is not in doubt that we need to restore our forests and protect our forests. However, what is, of course, you know, contentious is the use of carbon offsets coming from forest by companies. And here, I still think there is, you know, potential for credible and robust and permanent engagement of companies and in buying credits here. But it's also important that we, you know, look at a certain quality of these carbon credits, and also that they are make sense in the context of the science-based target or whatever target the company has, which should always, you know, prioritize abatement within the company's operation, then compensation for measures, you know, compensation that means measures to prevent and reduce and eliminate sources of greenhouse gas emissions outside of the company's value chain, but still, you know, linked. And then neutralization, meaning offsetting of the residual emissions, preferably through carbon removal in nature-based systems. And for this, we need a lot of investments and a lot of support for startups and others that do invest in natural forest restoration today to generate these credits, offsets, support, you know, that is needed as part of the science-based targets.
Yeah. Thank you. Ulrich, I think acceptance of technical-based solutions is probably something you come across quite a lot as well, especially your company. What has your experience been with this, and do you think we can still manage to generate more acceptance for technical solutions rather than just nature-based solutions as well? Yeah.
Sure. So I totally agree with Charlotte. I mean, people have a tendency to love nature-based solutions, and I totally understand that, and I also do that. Tech-based solutions are different, and the bigger they are, the more intimidating they may be. When you think about wind farms or also solar plants, I mean, for some people they are just disgusting. For some people they are too loud, too noisy. But I think what is currently happening in the world is that people see climate or experience climate change in a way which is facing them with the fact that it's not there is the environment and there are human beings. It's showing them that human beings are part of the environment. And that makes protecting the environment or reducing carbon emissions a very personal and sometimes even emotional thing. And I think this is the right way to go. And on that path, I'm pretty sure that the acceptance of tech-based solutions will even increase more.
Maybe one last question, very quick one, starting with you. Do you think people could see tech solutions as sort of the easy way out, that they think, okay, you know, tech will solve it and will take care of it, and then I don't need to change so much?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I really think that it's like a big green wave that is affecting a lot of people more from an emotional point of view than from a mere standpoint that how much do I need to give to have the same life without any worries about nature and climate change. I think nobody makes that calculation.
Okay. Charlotte or Lynn, do you see that people could think it could be the easy way out?
I think there is always the temptation. There is a temptation to think if we don't do anything now, maybe there comes the huge, you know, enormous breakthrough and innovation, and then a miracle happens and all will be solved. I don't know. That might be maybe a psychological help for people, but let me say it's wrong. it's wrong. It will not happen. And we need to protect our ecosystems. We need to decarbonize our economies. And this requires many small technological solutions, but there is no wonder box that will get us out of this, climate crisis.
Yeah, so in earlier days, I heard people, academics saying, don't worry, climate change we can solve because we have technology breakthroughs. I think I heard more earlier I meant 10 years ago, but now I hear less. I hear people say technology solution, yes, they are part of a solution, but they are not the only solution because the scale, the challenge we're facing is too big. In a way that I think more and more people realize that if we don't have a healthy nature to absorb more carbon, we will have a more, carbon emission, more severe climate change induced severities. But then without really mitigating the climate change, we will not have that resilient system that can sustain us as a human being. I think this kind of realization getting more and more. And so I see the move from technocrat thinking of technology can solve everything to the point, I think this COVID-19, this biodiversity loss, this climate, carbon, global warming, global heating, I think making more and more people start realizing that this is not one way, one direction path, has to be really working all together, players together, approaches together, technology together. I think that togetherness I hear more now, and especially actually the last month you might have heard that in the UN biodiversity on climate change UN summit on biodiversity, similar to the UN summit on climate change last year. There's a head of states coming together to say nature is high up on my agenda. I think very soon nature could be one critical part of the solution and sanctuary for a human being. Very, very soon. I think people psychologically realize that. Maybe very soon that'll become a reality. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all three for taking part in this panel discussion today. It has certainly been very insightful, and I think also it helped a lot to get everything into perspective and to look at it more on a sort of what do we need to do first, or what can we do in the short term, and then in order to have a positive outcome in the long term in terms of looking at first reducing our emissions, then the ones that or our energy consumption, the one that and then when we look at energy generation, look at clean energy generation, and then looking at nature and tech-based solutions to deal with the rest of the emissions, so to say. Also, both nature and technical solutions are really important. They complement each other, they support each other in achieving the goals of carbon and then ultimately climate neutrality. And the faster we reduce emissions now, the less emissions we will need to try and get rid of at a later stage. I think that sums it up very well. Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Lynn Li from WWF, Professor Dr. Charlotte Streck from Climate Focus, and Ulrich Seitz from ReEnergy Ventures. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll have a nice lunch break now.
Thank you, Pia, and thank you, Charlotte and Ulrich.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.